Welcome back. We are looking at the text Atlas of the Heart by Dr. Brene Brown, and I am Dr. Michelina and I think that it is so important for us to just have a good understanding of some of the baseline emotions. We are not supposed to be leading with our feelings, but we are supposed to be using them as an indicator for what it is that we're going through, what it is that we're experiencing within ourselves. So last time we talked about places we go when it is beyond us, right? Today we're going to talk about places we go, emotional places we go when things are not what they seem, right? We're going to look at amusement, bittersweetness, nostalgia, cognitive dissonance, paradox, irony, and sarcasm. And what you will probably notice about all of those things is that they have sort of a duality going on, right? There's basically two competing emotions that are happening at the same time, right? And so, a lot of us have a little bit of a hard time experiencing our emotions because there's such an array of them, and some of them happen simultaneously, right? Like when we look at bittersweetness, bittersweet is both happy and sad. When we look at nostalgia, right, it'll be loss and yearning, happy and sad. So we get sort of overwhelmed, I think, a lot of times within ourselves when we have these competing sort of contradictory thought, emotional process going on. Like as if straightforward emotions weren't enough, we also can experience multiple emotions at the same time, right? So that is why I think being human can be so complex, and why I think it is so important to have a navigational tool and a roadmap to better understanding ourselves, our thought processes, and our emotional processes, right? So amusement is, and again, remember, I am teaching out of this book. A lot of these things are coming right from her and not from me. So when we're looking at amusement, amusement technically should be primarily positive, right? It should have to do with excitement, pleasure, um, and there should be sort of a like relaxed quality to it. Like, that was funny. I'm amused. That's amusing to me, right? Haha. Um, Also, though, we can get amusement when we're not expecting to be amused, right? Like it's like this sort of lazy laughter. We're like, oh, hey, that was actually funny, right? Like we're amused by that. And so amusement is this thing that it's not quite humor because it's humor that's connected to some things you maybe weren't expecting. Um, and when we are in amusement, we can and maybe should be in playfulness, right? So amusement is primarily supposed to be geared and trended toward the positive, the playful, right? And sometimes we're amused at things that maybe we necessarily shouldn't be amused at, right? Or sometimes something was supposed to be amusing and we don't find it very amusing, right? Like if you ever had an experience where somebody is telling you a joke and they want it to be funny and you just don't find it amusing. Like that's not funny to me, right? So amusement or lack of amusement can and does happen when we're finding something unexpected funny, or we're finding something that was supposed to be funny not funny, is not amusement, right? And so I think that we like amusement I don't think we have a problem with amusement. I think we have a hard time like eliciting amusement. Like it's kind of because it's where we go when things aren't expected, things aren't what they seem. So like amusement is kind of a hard thing to pin down. It's like chasing a butterfly. If you want to be amusing and you're trying too hard, like you're not going to be. And like a lot of the time when you're not trying for amusement, that's when it comes. And so like people very often like they'll find me amusing because I'm not trying to be. Okay, I'm not trying to be funny. I'm just trying to be serious. I'm just trying to lay a thing on the line. And just I guess because of the way I say it or the sort of point blankness about my bedside manner, it people unexpectedly are amused. They start laughing. They think it's funny. And they'll tell me all the time like I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at you. And I'm like, I know. Like I know everybody finds me amusing even though I'm not trying to be funny. That's part of why they do, is because I'm not, humor's not the thing we're going for here. And so, like, I will just sort of say things off the cuff. I'm not trying to elicit humor, but someone finds it amusing, right? And so, amusement's kind of like chasing a butterfly a little bit. Um, Bittersweetness is, I think, something that we all have experienced to some degree, and it's very hard. We don't love bittersweetness. Um, some of the some of the examples that are in the book that I didn't write down here are these are commonly shared experiences that she had kind of gotten from her research. Watching children grow up, very bittersweet. I have nieces and a nephew, and it is very bittersweet watching it from this distance. It's very bittersweet. So I can't even imagine for the parents out there, right? It's like you're happy, they're safe, they're taken care of, they're growing up. And also you're sad because you're losing that version of them as they grow, right? Leaving a job can be bittersweet. You know it's the time, you know it's the end of the thing, but it's also sad because it's the end of the thing. You've done it for a while. Divorce or ending a relationship can be bittersweet. Like you're like, I know that had to end, but also I was with them for a long time and that's sad. Graduation or like an ending of a milestone, moving along that same kind of a thing. Letting go of friendships that aren't working, right? The end of a thing that was a good thing just coming to an end will very often elicit the bittersweet feeling of sad and also happy. Um, and so we kind of experience a lot of bittersweetness at the end of a thing because it's sad it's over, but it has to end for the next thing to happen. And bittersweetness is one of those things that if you grow rapidly, you might have a lot of bittersweet moments, right? Like if you are very good at let go seasons, you probably have a lot of bittersweetness. As somebody who has had a lot of let go seasons, I am very good at bittersweetness. A lot of things are bittersweet. Now, the ability to have those dual emotions at the same time is something that we grow into. That is what the developmental research shows. Like, it's not present in young children. Their emotions are more straightforward. But when we grow, we get toward, 7, 8, 9, 10, children can report experiencing positive and negative emotions simultaneously. So ages 0 to 7, children cannot do that. 7, 8, 9, 10, they can. 10 and 11, they can recognize and understand that there's a tension that they're feeling, right? So that ability to experience dual emotions that are seemingly contradictory at the same time is a developmental skill. So people who have not developed emotionally past someone that's the age of 3 years old cannot do it, right? If you are emotionally stunted, repressed, you will probably have a harder time doing both. Additionally, if you are somebody that is more like used to the nuance of emotion, then you might be able to recognize the emotional states as they come. Like I'm very good at recognizing bittersweetness, and I have been, and it is almost always at the end of a thing because I can see the ending coming, and I know it's coming, and it's sad to see it come. So these sort of emotions that we go to when things aren't what they seem, they are kind of tricky a little bit, like unintentionally, not trying to be, right? To the point of bittersweetness, we also have this point of nostalgia, right? Nostalgia is context specific bittersweetness, right? So, like, if you remember something in your past and you wish that things were like that now, you're probably going to feel some nostalgia. Nostalgia, and this is just so I can tell you, nostalgia biblically is not a good thing. Ecclesiastes tells us that, like, it is not good to be yearning for the past. So nostalgia biblically is don't do it. Stay in the present. But academically, nostalgia can run the gamut. It can be a helpful thing at times. It can be a good thing. But it also can be a very bad thing. And it can be a dangerous thing. And historically, nostalgia has a dark past, right? Nostalgia was considered a medical disease and a psychiatric disorder until the early 19th century. It was considered a dangerous, bad thing. And it kept people in the past, ruminating and focusing on things. Now, nostalgia is described differently, and it's looked at more positively as an emotion that can help us to see what we find to be important. But the kind of definition she comes to is that bottom one. Nostalgia is a yearning for the way things used to be in our idealized and self-protected version of the past. And like for me, if we have to idealize something and it's the version of us in self-protection, then it's not really a true view of the thing. And so for me, I'm going to have to agree with Ecclesiastes on this. I'm going to have to agree with the old kind of definition here, which is that nostalgia is probably more harmful than it is helpful because it keeps you from looking at things accurately, truly, objectively, and it also, I think, hinders the present. But again, some of that is me, and you know, I don't want to over include my own understanding here, but I will just say that you want to beware nostalgia. And I was talking about this, the movie Midnights in Paris with Owen Wilson, where he goes back to the 1920s and he thinks it's the best time. And then he meets someone in the 1920s and she wants to go back to the Belle Epoque, which is like the highlight of what she thinks was the best, right? And this nostalgia is always looking back wistfully. And well, guess what? You're not going to move forward and you're not going to appreciate where you are. And that's kind of the premise of the movie. Really, really fun movie, I think. So nostalgia is a context-specific, bittersweet emotion. And it includes yearning and loss. And, you know, when you're thinking about yearning, it does mean you have a deep capacity to feel to miss, to want, but that's not always, that can be very painful. That can be a very painful thing when you're missing what you don't have and you're looking back to the past and you can't get it back. You're a little bit setting yourself up to fail, quite frankly. But it's important to be able to recognize nostalgia anyway, because you want to know, it tells you what you're idealizing, it tells you what you're missing, it tells you what you're wanting, right? And again, like I said, these emotions of things that aren't what they seem has to do a lot with two contradictory or seemingly contradictory things existing together, coexisting. Cognitive dissonance is one I think everyone experiences. And it's more of a thought that causes feelings, but cognitive dissonance is this concept where we experience anxiety or tension because we have two different understandings going on and they don't work together, right? So, like, I see this a lot in Christians when they believe in the rapture, but then they learn that the rapture is not real. It's a cognitive dissonance. They have a hard time trying to hold those two beliefs because one says it exists, the other says it does not. And actually, the example she uses in the book is also a religious example because it talks about how in 1954, these two social psychologists infiltrated a doomsday cult to find out what would happen when the leader's prophecy failed to be fulfilled. And so the leader promised her followers that the world would end December 21st, 1954, and that they would escape that. They would be picked up and transported safely to safety. And because of that, many people who really believed her quit their jobs, gave away their houses, dispersed their savings in anticipation of the end, right? And this has happened. People do things like this. This is why I think the rapture doctrine is so dangerous. It's promising an end that you can't predict. And also, there is no rapture. So that is something that they found here, that when you buy into an idea so deeply, you cannot see that it's not true, even when it doesn't come to pass. And so they predicted that the believers who had not made a strong commitment would quietly lose their faith, but those who gave away their possessions and waited, they would double down on their belief. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Because when you've invested so much emotionally, circumstantially into an ideology and it doesn't come to pass, it's a sunk cost fallacy. You've invested so much in it. What does this say about you that it's not true? Right? You were duped. You believed a lie. And so cognitive dissonance occurs when there are things that are both inconsistent with each other and we don't know how to make it make sense in our head. And so what ends up happening a lot of the times, I see it all the time, is that when people receive information that contradicts what they already believe in their head, the first thing that they go to do is to make it go away. The discomfort, the irritation, the vulnerability of like, what is this? What is this true or isn't this? They want it to go away. So they get defensive, they get angry, they shut it out, they like can't listen to it, like they can't be receptive because they already have an opinion on X thing and they can't imagine a world where that opinion's not true. Right? We see this kind of with Trump, right? There's a reason why it's called like Trump derangement syndrome, because people who believe Trump is bad will never be able to see any evidence that says he's actually not bad. They can't see it. And because they believe Trump is bad, they will go and like prescribe things to him that have nothing to do with him. It's like the craziest thing I've ever seen, where people just be in a comment section be like, oh, that's Trump's fault. And it has nothing to do with Trump, like literally nothing to do. So cognitive dissonance is a real thing to be aware of, and it's kind of an epidemic. Like people cannot hold these two conflicting thoughts. And I will say, I used to always teach this. The sophisticated mind can hold two opposing viewpoints and argue both of them relatively equally. And I used to do this exercise with my students all the time, where it's like, I don't care what you actually think about this. I want you to argue a point and substantially prove it, right? Like, it's a thought process, it's a critical thinking skill. You're not looking to prove what you believe is the thing. You're like, hey, here's a thing, here's a prompt. Two things can happen here. Which one do I see more evidence for? And I'm going to argue that. You don't have to believe it or not, right? I used to teach that to my kids all the time. And so, like, the sophisticated mind can argue two contradictory points. Your beliefs and your values, of course, they matter, but that's from a different place. Now, when you align your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and actions, then, they should all be aligned. But most people are, first off, they're not doing that anyway. They say they value one thing and then they go do another. But cognitive dissonance is this mental process, this mental state that causes an emotional dysregulation in us. And people really, really struggle with they really, really struggle with getting information that contradicts firmly held stances and beliefs, right? And so, not Brene Brown, but someone that she's an associate with, his name's Adam Grant, makes this great point that there's another set of cognitive skills that might matter more than learning and thinking, and it's the ability to rethink and unlearn. And I will just say that skill of rethinking and unlearning is so important in personal growth and development. You have to be able to say, I think I might have been wrong about this. I believed this my whole life and it wasn't true. And that gets into some like betrayal trauma for people a lot of times, or grief, because they're mourning a version of themselves that functioned under this paradigm and it wasn't the case. And I will tell you, there are so many things I had to unlearn about my own self, about my own way of showing up in the world. And one of those is actually on the next slide. And I'm going to just get to it actually, because one of the big things I had to unlearn was sarcasm. Okay. I used to always speak sarcastically. And sarcasm is a type of irony that one thing is said and another thing is meant. And usually the thing that is meant to ridicule, tease, or criticize. So I all the time was very sarcastic. And what I learned and I had to unlearn actually, was that not only is sarcasm the lowest form of wit, sarcasm's full of lies. You're a liar if you're sarcastic. And I had to unlearn that quick, right? Like we're told, let our yes be yes, let our no be no. And when I was really learning, unlearning, relearning things about my own self and how I showed up in the world, I realized like I was not careful with my words. Nobody really knew what I was actually believing or feeling because I was sarcastic all the time. And it was a defense mechanism. And it was a lie. And so I had to unlearn that, relying on sarcasm. Because I started to really practice, say what you mean what you say, do what you say. And when you are in sarcasm, you are not saying what you mean and you're not meaning what you say. Like if I say, great job, and I think you did a terrible job, I'm being sarcastic. That says not a lot about me, quite frankly. It means that I'm critical and ridiculing. It is just not the way I wanted to show up in the world. And so I had to unlearn that about myself. So mm, she puts irony and sarcasm kind of together, and she says she doesn't love doing it, but irony and sarcasm are both forms of communication where the literal meaning of the word is different than the message that you're trying to convey. And then sarcasm is kind of to that negative, derogatory effect, right? And there's all kinds of irony in literature, right? Dramatic irony is one. Situational irony is another, right? Those are literary elements. So I'm not saying irony doesn't have a place. I'm not saying all of these don't have places, right? Bittersweet, I think, is an important thing for us to be able to experience. Um, Cognitive dissonance, people just do experience. They don't even realize they're doing it. So these are the places we go mentally and emotionally when things are not what they seem. And irony is kind of the practice of making a thing not what it seems. When you say one thing and you do another, you have another, right? And so irony can be really, productive. Um, it can be really productive, but it also can be sort of duplicitous, and you want to be careful with that. And so I kind of have stopped. I've almost completely stopped sarcasm, and I've tried hard to stop any kind of form of communication where I'm being ironic, because again, it's not straightforward. It's not authentic. And I haven't, I mean, I don't see any issue with it. I haven't had any complaints. I've had more people like me better because I'm a straight shooter now, and I used to not be. So take that for, what you will. The last is paradox, and paradox I think is really cool because it is forcing us to consider two different things, and they shouldn't go together, but they have to, right? That the Latin is the seemingly absurd but really true paradox, right? Things go together, and it's not just oxymoronic, right? An oxymoron is jumbo shrimp. It's a big little shrimp, right? A paradox is that there are these two related components, and they seem to contradict each other, but they actually both exist, and they both are true, and they both make sense. Um, And so I like some of her examples. Vulnerability is the first thing we look for in other people, and the last thing we want to show about ourselves is a paradox. We live in a lot of paradox. I'm not going to call it hypocrisy, but it can get there, right? Here's some other ones. We're drawn to authentic, imperfect people, but we're scared to let people see who we really are, right? We want people to be authentic and imperfect, but we don't want to be that. And then you see how it can get into hypocrisy there. Um, Vulnerability is courage in you and inadequacy in me. Right? I think these are so powerful because they tend to be true. Human nature tends to do this where we champion something we see other people doing, but then when we go to do it, we feel like it's a failure. It's very paradoxical. Humans are very paradoxical. I'll give you another one. People are very good at helping other people see their own issues, can't see their own. And I say this a lot, the pickle in the jar can't read its own label, right? It's like we have been given this wonderful ability to be able to help other people, but we cannot help ourselves, right? It's paradoxical. And so I think that a lot of times we try to make it an either or, and paradox holds space for the and. You can have creativity and discipline. You can have humility and audacity. You can be innovative and execute, right? It's this idea that you can kind of put things together that are true. And when they come together, they're still true, but they're harder to understand how they're both true, but they are. It can be both hard and good. And so when we get better at paradox, and I like this point that she makes, embracing paradox teaches us how to think deeper and with more complexity. It invites us to reality check the validity of the statements. It moves us away from oversimplifying how systems, organizations, and humans work, right? And I think she is right. Like when two things that are seemingly contradictory are both true, we get a deeper sense of nuance, a deeper appreciation, deeper understanding. And to the point about like cognitive dissonance is not actually an emotional process, it's a thinking one that brings emotion about. Paradox is the same. Paradox is not an emotion. Like cognitive dissonance, it starts with thinking, but it brings in emotion as we start to feel the tension and the pull of different ideas. But with paradox, our brain wants to solve the puzzle, right? We want to logic it out. And so a lot of the times, paradoxes cannot be solved with rational thought or logic. Sometimes these contradictions have to coexist for us to have deeper understanding. And so when we do that, when we just let it be, both things are true, and we just kind of hold space for that, paradoxes can help us to think in expansive ways that lead us into more vulnerable, courageous discussions, right? And so I think that the places we go when things aren't what they seem is a highly complex, nuanced ability in people. And I think if we can get good at these things, if we can get good at bittersweetness, if we can get good at understanding cognitive dissonance, if we can get better at paradox, we can become more well-rounded as humans in our own thoughts and our own emotions, but also in our own ability to be safe in relationship with other people, right? We're not going to force someone to have to commit to this or that when we can see the way they may be experiencing both. Right. And so it's really, I think places we go when things aren't what they seem is a really cool sort of thought process. Like it's a kind of cool thought exercise. But also it's really helpful for us to name some of the things that might be complex in us. I don't think these are straightforward, right? They're not like what we'll see on the next one, which is places we go when we're hurting. Those are easy to understand, hard to feel. I want to say things that aren't what they seem are both confusing to feel and confusing to think about. And so it things aren't what they seem. We think they're one way and they're actually another. And that's always a tough kind of position for us to be in. And it does create a tension. And it is worth our time to think about, right? So Atlas of the Heart, mapping meaningful connection and the language of human experience, I think is such an important read. And so if you are watching and you are enjoying, I'm glad, and I will definitely be continuing with the series, and I will be seeing you on the next discussion.